Okay, the quiz is it's kind of like a check to see. You need to make sure you know three things. I'm going to underline part of the sentence. Is it a noun phrase? Is it a verb phrase? Is it a prepositional phrase? That's 6 questions on the test. Another 5 questions. I'm going to underline a single word in the sentence. Then you have a whole bunch of choices. It'll be like adjective, adverb, noun, verb, determiner, preposition, auxiliary verb. So what is the part of speech of the word that's underlined? Another question will be, what is syntax? I'll ask you to define syntax. You have to recognize a multiple choice answer with that. And then you have what's called phrase structure rules in other languages. So it's a short quiz. It's important to understand before you start diagramming. We need to know the difference between the noun phrases, the verb phrases, and the prepositional phrases. If you know those 3 things, you should be able to do a diagram. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. And I have in the Canvas, I do have a short little video that goes over the quiz. You can look at that too. It'll even have practice questions in there. Okay, let me share my screen. Let's get started with today's lecture. So we're focusing on syntax, and specifically, we're getting into what's called transformations. We're going to look at that right now. So we'll start off right here. I can't get my touch screen to work right now. I don't know why. See if this does it. So it says, though there is a limited vocabulary in the English language, syntax allows an almost unlimited way to combine words to create new sentences, many of which are uttered for the first time. In fact, it's quite possible that this is the first time this sentence has ever been written. Basically, anything over 20 words is probably a brand new sentence. A syntactic catalyst called transformation allows for such sentences and is one such tool to create them. Transformation is a change in a sentence from the deep structure. You can think about deep structure as the original form of the sentence to a surface structure, which is a variation of the original, without changing the meaning of the sentence. This rule applies to the deep structure of a sentence to generate a new surface structure without changing the meaning of the sentence. So today we'll talk about two different kinds of what we call transformations. The first one involves active passive voice transformation. The second one involves indirect object shift transformation. So let's take a look here. Sujin invited Hiroko. Hiroko was invited by Sujin. So now the question is, are these sentences different? Are they the same in meaning? What do you guys think?
They're the same in meaning.
That's right. So if I said Sujin invited Hiroko or Hiroko was invited by Sujin, it's the same thing. Are they arranged exactly in the same order? No, but they have the same meaning. So we can say that. So now the question is, how do we get from sentence 1 to sentence 2 here? How do we do this? What's the first thing that we did here? What do we do with Hiroko here?
It got moved to the beginning of the sentence.
That's it, right? So we have that. Now let's look at the next thing. So instead of invited, what do we do?
You added the was invited.
Good. Okay. And then notice how we have Sujin has been placed at the end of the sentence. So the subject actually becomes the object and the one becomes the subject and so on. So let's get this down in note form here. So first of all, so the object Hiroko becomes the subject of the sentence. That's number one. Number two, we have to use a form of the be verb plus the past participle. Now remember, we said that a verb can have 5 forms, right? Let's look at break. To break, break, broke, broken. You can do this with any verb, right? So we have the infinitive, which is to break. We have the base form of the verb, which is break. We have the simple past broke, the past participle broken, and then we have breaking, which is the present participle form of it. So we can say that verbs generally, they have 5 forms. And we can see that with this. Now, if we go back to the one up here, we can see invited, right? So if we look at the 5 forms of invite, we have to invite, invite, invited, invited again, inviting. So we're going to say here that invited is the past participle form of this verb. Invited is a past tense. Notice how they're the same in this case. So we have to invite, invite, invited, invited, inviting. So that second step. So the only way to create passive voice is to have a form of the be verb plus the past participle. And then finally, we have by plus a noun phrase, or really what was the original subject. We can put there. So you have Hiroko was invited by Sujin. So we call this, can you name the grammar term? We're going to call this passive voice transformation. This is what we're going to call this. Remember, whichever constitutes the more basic structure of the sentence will be the deep structure. This is how you know which sentence is deep and which is surface structure. Now let's do some practice. Remember, we're going to take the steps. Remember the steps. Object becomes a subject. We'll say the be plus the past participle, and then by plus a noun phrase. Remember those things. So let's take a look at sentence number 1. You will see this question on the test as both multiple choice and also free response. Or maybe it's just multiple choice. I can't remember. But let's take a look at it. So the deep structure is Mary hit the ball. We want to change this sentence into passive voice. So what do we do first?
You put the ball at the beginning of the sentence. So
Good.
it would be the ball was hit by Mary.
Good. So then hit.
You fucking
And here's my question. You might think, well, hit is present, but notice how if it were present, I would have said that, right? I would have said Mary hits the ball. I didn't do that. So you have to look at hit as irregular. It's actually the past tense. So that is correct. The ball was hit, and then we have by, and we have Mary. So this changes this sentence from the deep structure to the surface structure. And we're going to practice a whole bunch more here. Musalam writes the letter. So now what do we do?
It would be the letter was written by Muslim.
Don't worry about the verb. Let's just get the letter first. Your verb is not right, but we'll deal with that in a minute. So we have the letter. Now let's look at the original. The original sentence is right. So we need to identify that as the simple present. And it means when we rewrite it, we also need to use a simple present. That's why you can't say was written. So the next thing you want to remember is the tense is indicated in the auxiliary verb if you have a two-part or multiple verb string, multiple word verb string. So now the letter, you can't say was, what do we say? The letter?
The letter is written.
There we go. Thank you. By blah, blah, blah. So notice how writes is the simple present and is the simple present. So we have not changed the original verb tense of this sentence in the original state. This is why I talked about verb tenses last week. Everything I do, there's a plan. Believe me. It's like mathematics. It fits together at some point. It will always fit together. Now, this is tricky stuff here. Now, anybody can take the object and move it to the beginning of the sentence, right? I don't see that as being a problem, but I see you guys having huge problems with the verb. That's what worries me. Now, let's look at this one. Has completed. This is present perfect tense as we talked about last week. So we want to continue with the present perfect tense. So has what? The homework has
been completed.
good. Yes, yes, like that. We're going to keep it going here. And then what do we do?
Completed. Oh, I'm sorry.
Finito.
Good.
Finito.
So we got it. Now, the main thing is we have to maintain the verb tense, and we have. We said has completed. We have has been completed. We have the present perfect tense in both cases. The difference is there's two major differences between active and passive voice. With passive voice, the subject becomes the receiver or the recipient of the action. Number one. Number two, we have what's called a form of the be verb in there. In this case, it's been. And we also have by plus the noun phrase, which we see here. Maybe that's the third thing. Okay, let's take a look at another one. Now, in the original, you have to know what the verb is. The verb is past. And that we're going to say is simple past, right? So when we rewrite it using passive voice, we continue with the simple past verb tense. So last week, the English 306 midterm exam, I think most people can do this. This is where the hard part comes. Now, what do we do? Past changes to
Would it be was past?
yes. And then what?
By Maria.
Good. Right there. So now we have, and let's just double check, make sure we're doing everything correctly. Now, in the multiple choice question about active and passive voice, I strongly recommend that you have some blank paper, and before you look at the answer choices, you change it. Change the sentence into the active or the passive voice. Make the change, write it down. Once you've written it down, then look at the answer choices. It'll be much easier. If you just kind of wing it and look at the answers without thinking about it, it's just going to confuse you. So I recommend that you do that when you do the when you actually do the test. The quiz will not ask you this. The quiz is very simple. Okay, let's start. John wrecked his car. So we'll say the car, and then wrecked changes to what? Notice how it's past.
Was written
That's it. Thank you. Was wrecked, and then what?
by John.
We'll do a little bit more practice in a minute. Okay, so far, this is what we call active and passive voice transformations. To recap, so to change a sentence from active to passive voice, the object becomes the subject of the sentence. We add a form of the be verb plus the past participle. And then, and this is optional, by the way, this last part, is we add by plus the noun phrase. Those are the three things. Read the next group of sentences and see what kinds of transformations or what kind of transformation is going on. So let's try this one. How about Nicole? Can you unmute for a second?
Yep.
Okay, go ahead and read the first sentence here.
Tom sent a message to Steve.
Okay, then the next one.
Tom sent Steve a message. I gave the present to Tom. I gave Tom the present. I do not know how to say those names.
I mean, odd.
Hamiad throw the ball to Thanavu.
Yeah, that's right.
And
These are Middle Eastern and Thai names. And then
Hamiad threw Thanavu the ball.
there. Now, what you just read, Nicole, how are the second set of sentences different from the first set? What's happening here? What do you see?
Well, the first thing I noticed is they seem more direct. Tom sends Steve the message. It's from one person to the other immediately, and then what it is.
Okay.
I would say it's more active. I think the first sentences are a little bit more passive.
No.
No.
Mm-mm.
I
No,
don't
no,
know.
no, no. The only way it can be passive voice is there has to be a form of the be verb in there. There's no be verb in any of those sentences. You see what I'm saying? It says sent, gave, threw. These are all
The
these,
subject shifts. In one, the subject is the present, and in the other, the subject is the person.
no, the subject is Tom, I, Hamiad. It does not change. The subject is the same in every sentence, no matter if it's the first or the second column. So I don't see that. But let me rephrase it. What word is not included in the second group of sentences that is included in the first group?
Two.
Good. Now we're getting somewhere. So we don't see the preposition in the second group, and somehow it's a little bit odd, but we have subject, verb, indirect object, direct object. We have two nouns in a row in the second one. In the first ones, we have Tom sent a message, and then we have a prepositional phrase. You guys see that? Okay, now this is what we call indirect object shift. That's what it is. This one is much easier to understand than passive voice because instead of 3 steps, there's only 2. It's a little easier to get. Okay, so let me ask you. So what are the 2 steps that take us from the deep structure to the surface structure? What do we do with the word Steve when we went to the next sentence? What do we do?
We moved towards the front of the sentence, not
We-
necessarily to the front, but towards.
We got it. We're putting the word Steve directly after the verb, right? You guys see that? You see how Steve goes right after the verb in the second one? Tom sent Steve. Tom sent a message to Steve, right? So we're going to call this. This is what's called an object of a preposition. It's the object of a preposition because it comes after to. To is a preposition. Remember, you can go to the cloud. So we'll say the object of the preposition is moved directly after the verb. And then what's the next step? What do we have to do with the preposition? What do we do with it?
You remove it.
That's it. That's all I'm going to say on it. I don't want to get it complicated. There it is. I'm simple. We'll just get rid of it. Delete it. Okay, now, here's my question. If you're talking to a non-native speaker or you're talking to a young child who hasn't got a good grasp on the language yet, which sentences do you think are better, easier to understand? Do you think the deep structure or the surface structure, the original is better or the variation of the original is better? What do you guys think?
The surface structure.
I'm going to say no. I think non-native speakers will understand this better because they see how that preposition fits in there and it introduces this word. It confuses them to see 2 nouns in a row here because they may not be familiar with the subject, verb, indirect object, object sentence type, but a lot of non-native speakers and children, they're pretty familiar with the subject, verb, object sentence type. This is the one that's different. So generally speaking, the original way to do something would be better than the surface structure. So active voice is going to be easier for young children and non-native speakers to understand than passive voice. So that's why I'm saying that. So some of you, not all of you, but some of you that are thinking of teaching young children first, second grade, and so on, you want to make sure you understand the difference between original or deep structure type sentences grammatically versus the surface structure. And even, you know, how you talk to young children. Instead of saying there is no talking in class right now, they may not even know what that means. You say, stop talking. You make a direct speech act there. They're going to understand that better. Instead of saying, how many times do I have to tell you not to chew gum? Don't ask a question. Say, Johnny, stop chewing gum. You bring the garbage can over, spit it into the garbage can. So with young children, a lot of times it's better to be more direct in how you say things. It's if you're really indirect and use a lot of complicated grammar structures, it may go over their head. And with non-native speakers, you have to be careful how you speak to them too, especially if they're really low in their English abilities. So think of some of the implications with these things. Okay, let's keep going. I think you'll find this really easy. This one. So let's apply indirect object shift. Remember we take the object of the preposition is placed directly after the verb. We delete the preposition. That's it. It's not rocket science, right? So Mary hit the ball to her dad. Changes to Mary hit. We have to take this.
Her dad the ball.
And we're going to do that right there. That's it. And we want to remember to delete that. So that would how we would change it. Muslim writes the letter to his jolly old friend. I have a pretty good noun phrase here. So we have to take his jolly old friend. Where do we put it?
The beginning.
After writes.
And then we're going to delete the preposition. So Muslim writes his jolly old friend the letter. So now what you're seeing here is exactly what you're saying is that. You're seeing the subject, verb, indirect object, object. That's what you're saying. So it is possible, it seems crazy, but you can put two nouns in a row. It is possible to do it, and you can do it with this sentence type. Okay, let's go to the next one. Nidal gave the homework assignment to his professor. So we take the object of the preposition here, and where do we place it?
After gave.
And then we simply delete the preposition. Now this is a long one. Remember though, you see the word to, right? So everything after to is the object. So the students of English 306, we need to take this, and where do we put it?
Described.
So we're putting it right here. Now, last week can be in the beginning, at the end of the sentence, wherever you want to put that. You see what we did here? Now, if you wanted to, notice this. Here's another. I'm not going to require you to know this one exactly, but notice how we can even get rid of this preposition. And then where do we place English 306?
Can you put that one in the beginning?
I'm going to put it right.
Before students.
Yes, I'm going to turn it into an adjective. You see what we're saying here? So Marie distributed the English 306 students the test last week. Now, if it's awkward, you go, I don't know, this is confusing. There's too many things going on here. Then leave it in its original state. Maria distributed the students or just distributed the test to the English 306 students. If you think that's less confusing, always go with the more basic version. Usually, if you're not sure. Okay, let's try another one. John sold his car to Anthanapol. So then what do we do with Anthanapol?
You put it right after sold.
We got it. So now we have that indirect object shift there. We're just shifting. We're shifting the object of the preposition, right? We're shifting that and putting it before the direct object. So because it's before the direct object, we call it the indirect object. So these are the two. And let me just make the point I want to make about this, that I'm just showing you two examples of how English grammar or syntax allows us to say things differently, to create different sentences based on the grammar or the syntax. That's the idea I'm trying to get across here. Okay, now let's try 3 at a time here. And I did my video last time with the chat thing, and that was a disaster. Somebody said in another class they couldn't tell what in the heck I was doing because we were all doing the chat stuff. The chat works really well, but it doesn't do well if you want to record the lecture. It doesn't show anything, so I have to be careful this time. I'm not going to do that. I want to record this one. Okay, so several cities. Now, whatever you're doing on the test, you need to pay attention to this information here. Apply passive, apply active, apply IO shift, right? So if we're doing active, we're doing in reverse. So it's already in passive voice. Several cities were heavily damaged from the hurricane. So now we have to take hurricane and put that in the beginning of the sentence to create active voice. So the hurricane did what? It heavily what?
Damage several cities.
There you go, right? So we have to figure that out. So we'll say that the hurricane heavily damaged several cities is the same as several cities were heavily damaged from the hurricane. Now notice in this case, we have were, and then we have the simple past also in the main verb in the active voice version of it. Okay, let's try passive. Citizens will contact the police about the incident. So then we have the police. What? The police will, and we want to keep future, but now what do? The police will
Be contacted.
and then by,
The citizens about the incident.
good. So the police will be contacted by the citizens about the incident. Then number 3, we have apply IO shift, right? So be careful. If I say IO shift, don't rewrite it into active or passive voice. Just take the object of the preposition, place it directly after the verb, and delete the preposition. So in this case, we have to take her employees, and where do we put it?
After giving.
There you go. And then we delete the preposition. Now we go number, let's do 4, 5, and 6. Okay, let's look at 4. Many students were allowed to leave school early, right? So apply active. Now, I'm throwing a curveball at you. So this time I have omitted the actual subject, or what should be the subject. It's not included. So who allows students to leave school early? And then we have to make that the subject. Who might do that?
The teachers allowed the students to leave school early.
Good, thank you. So we could say that. So we're saying, and you could say the principal, administrators, the teachers, or whatever you want, but you have to put a subject in there. The teachers allowed many students to leave school early. So we have were here, and then we double check, and we also have the simple past in the main verb in the active voice version of the sentence. Okay, this is a tough one. This is the one, if I had $100 to donate to somebody's cause, I would do it if you could answer this, but I don't have the money. But,
Could you put is being dismissed?
and that's why you would get the $100. So-
Nice. Do you have Venmo, Professor?
No. Good. So you have the case is, you really know your grammar to do this, right? But what you did in your brain is you saw it was present progressive was the original verb tense. And by saying is being dismissed, it's still present progressive. So you kept the integrity of the verb tense is the same there. So the case is being dismissed by the judge. You got it. I'm impressed. I didn't think anybody would get that one. The next one also is going to throw you for, see if somebody can do this one. So number one, who builds roofs? And I didn't put it in there. It's implied. I'm showing you that sometimes we don't always put the by plus the noun phrase. It's implied. So we sometimes don't need to put it in there. But
Would it-
who
Would it
built?
be many roofs are being rebuilt?
No, that's still passive. It says apply active. You got to give me the agent. You have to give me the doer, the action here. Who builds
The
roof?
roofers rebuilt the
Good.
roof,
And let's say workers who have to
or
repeat.
workers, or
Yeah.
something.
Workers, you said rebuild many roofs because of that. So notice how the original, this is the simple present. That's what it is. So it goes from are to rebuild. Now, if I said are rebuilding, that would be different. If I said many roofs, or I said are being rebuilt, then you would say workers are rebuilding, but I didn't say that. I said many roofs are rebuilt because of. So are and rebuild are the same. We actually put an agent, a doer, the action in the beginning. Workers rebuild many roofs because of the new regulations. Okay, let's try the next one here. Authorities have awarded a gold medal to the gymnast. It says apply IO shift. So the gymnast is placed where?
After awarded.
And we have that one. Okay, here's the next question. Now, how do I know that this is not passive voice? Can anybody answer that question? This is active voice. Authorities have awarded the gymnast a gold medal. How do I know that this is active voice?
You removed the two and shifted the gymnast.
Okay, so we instead of using the passive voice steps we talked about, we use the indirect object shift steps, right? So we didn't even do any other changes other than that. But that doesn't technically answer my question. How is this not passive voice? What does it not have in it? If it had this one word in there, it would be passive voice. What is that word?
Will? Been?
Yes, yes, that. I was trying to, if you can see my, yeah, so authorities have, if it said the gymnast has been awarded by the authorities a gold medal, then it would be passive voice, but there's no been. The authorities is the doer, not the receiver of the action, and there's no by phrase. There's no by plus noun. So this is not passive voice for at least 3 reasons. So typically, active voice, the subject is the doer of the action. There's no be verb, right? Now with passive voice, the subject is the receiver of the action. Then we have be plus the past participle. And then in some cases, we have by plus the noun phrase. Now, the next one, we need to change it to passive voice. We definitely need to do that. So the workers will have completed the project by next year. So we need to take this object here. You guys see that? We're going to take that object and start the sentence off with that. Then what do we do? Will what?
Be completed by next year.
No. You're almost there. You forgot about half.
Will have been?
Yes. Now you're keeping the same. You're keeping it consistent. Yeah. So the project will have been completed and then.
For the workers.
Right. So what we did
That makes sense.
is the main thing is the original sentence is using future perfect tense, and then the passive voice version of the sentence is also using future perfect tense. We have not changed that. This is the part where you go off the cliff. The hard part, in my opinion. That's where people have the most trouble. So the main thing when you're changing sentences from active to passive, remember, keep the verb tense the same.
Even though it sounds kind of, if it sounds kind of weird in saying the sentence.
Well, what you have a good argument here that maybe it's better not to change it into the passive voice in the first place because it makes it a little more cumbersome. So the workers will have completed the project is less bulky than the project will have been completed, and you have a good argument. I'm not going to disagree with that at all. But I'm just showing you how it works, but you have to make a decision as a writer and as a speaker, what you think is most appropriate, in your situation, given your audience, your occasion, and the purpose for whatever you're doing. In many cases, writing handbooks will say use active voice verbs instead of passive voice verbs for kind of what you're saying right there. So I can understand. I know where you're coming from. Okay, let's look at number 9. The race car would have been driven faster had there not been a problem with the fuel line. So we need a subject, but the subject's implied. Can somebody give me a subject here? Because we're changing it to active voice. What
Would
do we
it be
say?
the race car driver?
Good. So the driver, and then what? Would have
Been
would have driven
faster. The race car.
Yeah, I'm going to put would have driven the race car faster had their blah, blah, blah. So in this case, we had to create the subject, imagine it. So the driver would have driven. Notice in this case, you guys see the difference here? There's no be verb. However, here there is. You see that? Right there. There it is. So that changes it. The driver would have driven the race car faster had there not been a problem with the fuel line. In reality, the implied past reality is this. The driver did not drive the car faster because there was a problem with the fuel line. That's exactly what it means. And then the last one, IO shift here. It says Gatelin gave presents to everyone at the shelter. So we're just doing IO shift on this one. So you got to change gears depending on your directions. So we have to take the object of the preposition, which is what, and then place it directly after the subject. So I guess Gatlin maybe. Gatlin gave presents to everyone at the shelter. So we have to take this word here, right? We're going to cut it. And where do we put it?
After gave.
Good. So you have to put it right here. And we keep this preposition. This is a different one. This is doing something different. So Gatlin gave everyone presents at the shelter. So we now have changed sentences using 2 different kinds of transformations. Indirect object shift and also active passive voice transformations. Then the last thing we'll talk about today, I'll do a brief review a little bit of the quiz coming up. Okay, it says, let's take a look at, this is called comparing phrase structure rules in other languages. We have a Spanish speaker that can do justice to this. I speak Spanish, but I have a gringo accent. Somebody that can beautifully read these sentences.
I could do that.
Okay, thank you. Number 1, ándale pues.
El maestro leyó el libro blanco.
There you go. Number 2.
La mujer bonita fue a bailar.
That's great. You sound like a native speaker. Perfect. You probably are, right?
Yeah.
There you go. That's great. Okay, now everybody see that? Now looking at the translations, here's my question. What is the major difference? Remember, the only difference you can say is the only difference that you see. Of course, there are many, many differences with English and Spanish phrase structure rules, but what is the difference based on these examples?
The first one, as for the English translation, you wouldn't say the book white, you would say the white book. But in Spanish, it's el libro blanco, so it's how you translate it to book white.
Okay,
Without-
so we can say in Spanish, adjectives follow nouns,
Yeah.
and then you want to say whereas in English, they precede nouns, something like that, right? So there's definitely a word order difference, right? Libro blanco. So does it make sense when I was speaking Spanish for the first, I would say blanco libro. It's exactly how I'd say it because that's how I did it in my own language. I didn't have the word order down right. What used to really throw me off in Spanish was things like this. This one, le digo a mi amigo que. So le and mi amigo are actually the same. Notice if I say amiga, feminine, le does not change. But if it's a direct object, you have lo and you have la. But not when it's an indirect object pronoun. That used to really throw me off how in Spanish, the indirect object pronoun here can be either, it can refer to either a man or a woman, either way. And then it can mean this, but what happens in conversational Spanish, somebody brings up, they'll say, le digo a Maria. Le digo a Maria que and lay this and lay that. You have to remember in the very beginning what lay refers to. So that used to confuse me. I'll go, okay, wait a minute, who is lay again? I was trying to think in my brain and I started getting mixed up on the pronoun references going on. And then pretty soon my comprehension was dropping like a rock. And then I got really confused. Okay, let's look at one more here. Let's go to Turkish. Hasan bir okuz aldi. Hasan bir araba aldi. Hasan bir okuz godu. So what's the major difference between Turkish and English phrase structure rules?
The verb comes after the noun.
Good. So you can say Turkish uses SOV word order, but English uses SVO word order. You guys see that? So yeah, you have the subject, object, verb. Again, you have subject, object, verb. So that's a pretty big difference, right? So if you're learning Turkish, you want to know what the word order is. And believe it or not, the SOV word order is about 50%. From my understanding, it's more than half of all the world's languages use that word order. So there's by no means, there's not a consensus on how to order things in a sentence from one language to another. Well, there's a consensus more or less between SOV and SVO, but it could be either way. Okay, I think we're good there. I wanted to talk about that. I think that covers everything. Let me briefly talk about the test that I've opened up, that you guys saw me open up. Okay, you see this sentence that I just wrote here? Okay, let me show you this. Okay, what I'll do about 6 times on the quiz for 60 points, I will do things like this.
Can you share your screen, please?
Oh, you can't see my screen? Crap, of course not. Okay, wait a minute. Is that good? You see that now?
Yes.
Okay, so if I underline the major difference, is that A, B, or C? Is it a noun phrase? Is it a verb phrase? A prepositional phrase? The major
Prepositional.
difference. Nope. There's no preposition anywhere in what I've highlighted there. The major difference. Determiner, adjective, noun. Say again.
Noun phrase.
Yes, that's right. Now, what if I did this? What if I underlined this? Between Turkish phrase structure rules,
Prepositional phrase.
because it has preposition plus a noun phrase. So exactly. Now, if I said this, is the major difference, blah, blah, blah. Actually, let me give you more of a better one on this. What if I said, what if I highlight all of this?
Verb phrase.
Would that be the verb phrase?
That's it. Okay. What if I
I think I
highlight?
interrupted Nicole saying the exact same thing.
No,
Sorry.
I heard it. I heard everybody. Okay, what's this one? We can't stop all that. Remember that we're teaching virtually. We interrupt each other all the time. Guys love to interrupt each other, so this is good. So to the baseball game, what is that? To the baseball game. What would we call that? A, B, or C?
C.
Which one?
See,
C. Good. I had trouble hearing you. Yeah. Yeah. So that's a prepositional phrase, right? If I highlight this part, what is it?
A.
Good. Okay, now here's one last thing. So that's 60 points right there. So if you can identify the different parts of sentences as either being noun phrases, verb phrases, or prepositional phrases, you're in great shape. If you cannot do that, you will fail. You will fail this test. Okay, let's look at some other things. We'll say noun, adjective, verb, adverb, prep, determiner, auxiliary verb. Okay, you're going to see this question 5 times. If you can't take the test by the lockdown browser, come to my office. You can do it during office hours. If the lockdown browser is tearing you up, driving you nuts, going to go crazy, come by my office. Believe me, I will figure it out with you. I will help you. We will figure this out one way or another. So don't stress out. It's stressful
Wait.
enough what we're doing right now, but don't get too stressed. Okay, go ahead.
When
When
is the test due?
I think I have this. I just opened it up all the way until next Tuesday. Okay, so let's take a
it
look
says
at
the 9th.
that's right. Okay, how about this? What if I underline the word to? What are you going to say? What is that?
A prep.
Good. That's it. What if I underline the?
Prep.
Determiner.
Determiner. If you said prep, you're in the wrong, you're kind of in the right area because it is a function word, but it's not a preposition. Prepositions indicate spatial relationships with things, to, under, over, beneath, above, beyond, things like that. Okay, how about this? What if I underline John?
Noun.
Good. What if I underline baseball?
Would it also be considered a noun?
It is a noun. I knew somebody would say that. It's in an adjectival position, but it is technically a noun. But it's kind of functioning as an adjective. Maybe let's. John went to the. maybe the.
If you highlighted baseball game, would that be like, would that still be as in like an adjective, like describing like?
It's in an adjectival position. Maybe if I said this, that would be easier. Then there's no doubt about it, right? Fun is an adjective, right? John went to the fun game. What if I said this though? If I said, what if I underline this word? What is it?
Is it a verb?
An auxiliary verb?
And that's even better. It's a verb, but it's the first verb in the verb string. So there's two parts, was watching. So was is actually the auxiliary verb. But what if I said this? John was at the fun game. What if I just say was, then what? Remember, the only way you can have an auxiliary verb is you have to have two verbs, and it's the first verb in the verb string. Here, we have no verb string. So what is was? Sounds like we have some doubts on this one. It's the main verb. It's the verb. So the be verb, it can do both. It can be an auxiliary verb and a main verb. The same thing with have. I can say I have a pencil in my hand right now, or I can say I have written 3 pages of my paper so far. So if I say I have a pencil, it's a main verb. I have written, have is a helping verb because it's the first verb in the verb string, and helping and auxiliary verbs is the same thing, right? So that's kind of what it's going to look like, right? So the quiz focuses around noun phrases, verb phrases, and prepositional phrases, number one. The second part of the quiz focuses around lexical categories, aka parts of speech. You need to have a good definition of syntax. It'll say syntax is, and pick whichever answer best explains syntax. And then you have one question about phrase structure rules. And I already even showed you the question already. It comes from Spanish. And you just saw that one anyway. So that's what it looks like. It isn't anything that you need to do heavy preparation for, but it's a good idea to do some practice. You can go to Canvas and look at the quiz review thing and go through the video and do a little bit of practice. And when you feel confident after doing the video, then take the quiz, get it done. Thank goodness I don't have to grade it, but I do have to grade everything right now. And I'm in the middle. I'm up to my eyeballs in grading right now. So I'm working on it, but I'm not making a lot of progress. I had about 7 people come by my office today, so I didn't get much done. But I will continue tonight and tomorrow, the next day, into Saturday, Sunday. While I'm watching football, I'll continue grading. I'll get as much as I can. And I don't know if you guys heard, but we're done at this point. I'm just doing random things now. There's no